I just had another fail, and I was like, maybe this is the universe's sign that I should not be an architect. Like, this is way too hard.
Claudia Ramirez, empowering you to become the optimal leader of your life. Let's turn on the Mindset Mic. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Mindset Mic. I am thrilled to have you here today because I have a very special guest. My good friend, Katerina Burianova, who is an architect, a Vastu Shastra expert, a fitness enthusiast, mental health, overall fitness and mindset. And I wanted to bring her on. Today's actually a very funny day because my podcast went live on her podcast, the Honeycomb podcast. And today I get to introduce her to you. And it's very, very special. I wanted to start off by first saying thank you. And did I say your name correctly? Because I know that there's like another way and it
Yes.
sounds a lot better than the way that I say it. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, thank you for pronouncing my name right. We were just saying it. You can roll the R's, so you got the last name right. But I'm from the Czech Republic originally, and my name is Katerina Burianova. So that's
I
the
love that.
phonetic.
I love that. I can hear you say that all day, every day, for breakfast,
Thank
lunch,
you.
and dinner. Oh my
Thank
God.
you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
As you know, I wanted to have you on because
Mhm.
Mindset Mike, I focus on helping people become the optimal leader of their life in and beyond sports. And ever since I heard about you through Annette, who you had on your podcast,
Yes.
I felt a connection with you. And there's
Mhm.
just something so special about the way that you carry yourself, your expertise, your vision. And I
Aw.
wanted people to know about you, learn more about your story and your expertise. I think it's just like a perfect
Mm.
way to showcase you to the world.
Oh my
Anybody who
gosh.
listens on here. And
Thank you.
I want people to learn more about your story as we go along. Can you please share a little bit before we start? I like to start with this question.
Mhm.
What is something gutsy that you've done in your life that has gotten you to where you are right now?
Oh, something gutsy. Probably starting my own architecture business. I think that because everything else, like applying to architecture school, that was kind of always the path. That was the plan. And, taking my architecture exams, that's like the next step of what to do. I've always wanted to have my own architecture firm, but
Yeah.
like really jumping in, incorporating. And I kind of had a plan, but I
Yeah.
didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
And then obviously the plan completely swayed, and we can talk about that. But I would say that's one of the biggest gutsiest things is just going for it, because starting your own company, just from like the building of it, because I'm a corporation, so it's not just an LLC. There was a lot more like legal stuff that had to go behind it. There's insurances I have to have, things like that, contracts, specific contracts. So that was a lot. But I think jumping into entrepreneurship is like one of the gutsiest things for sure that I've done.
You're so brave for that because I think,
Thank you.
and to all due respect to anybody, I believe that we all do the best that we can in that moment. But it's knowing
Mhm.
that you are in a specific moment in life and you see out a window and you want to actually go out there and tap into what you see outside this beautiful window. It takes a lot of courage. And
Mhm.
I've seen that I met you during the process after doing it,
Yes.
and hearing you share your story, it's so empowering even for me. So I would love to hear more about it. Like, what made you want to start your own architecture firm? How did this come about? When did the mindset shift? What drove you to this, really?
So I think I've wanted to be an architect since I was about 10 years old. So there's always been this, I want to be an architect. And somewhere along the way, I'm like, yeah, but I'd like to be my own boss and have my own architecture firm. When is that going to happen? I don't know, but it's going to happen. So I went through architecture school at Illinois Tech in Chicago, did 5 years there. So it's a 5-year program. Then I spent 2 more years in Chicago, was like, okay, it's too cold. I'm going to go back to California, where I mostly grew up. I've also lived on the East Coast, and I'm originally from the Czech Republic, like I mentioned. But so I came back to California and I started working at a firm locally, and I started studying for my architecture exams. And the architecture exams are grueling. It is a grueling process. There are 6 nationwide, and there's about a 50% pass rate per exam. So it's like taking the bar 6 times, is like, because everybody knows what the bar is for lawyers. So it's a lot. And then California, of course, has that extra 7th exam for like energy compliance and earthquakes. In
Okay.
California, you take 7. And so I completed my architecture exams in the fall of 2022. And once I finished that California exam, thank you, I was like, okay, now what? Because it took me about 3 years. There was a little bit of delay with COVID. I failed multiple times on some of the exams. And so it took me a while. And then I was like, okay, now what? And where I was working previously, my boss was in his early 80s. And so we had always kind of talked about when I started working there that it was my goal to eventually have my own firm. And so then the kind of question came up like, okay, now I have my license, which means I can stamp my own drawings. I can have, my own, I'm an architect now. I can call myself an architect. So I'm like, now, like, so when is it going to happen? Like, when should I, start to like when do I start? How do I start? That was the biggest question.
Yeah.
Is like, how do you start? Like, where do you start? So my husband's a general contractor, and he had incorporated the few months before I finished my architecture exams. So I kind of knew what the incorporation process looked like. And so I kind of already had an idea of what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, but the question was always like when? Like when should I, how am I going to work part-time at the firm that I'm currently working at? Am I going to?
Yeah.
So I started having these conversations, and of course there's always the like, will I be able to do it? Like, am I going to be able to, like take that jump, take that leap of faith? Yeah, take that leap of faith. And so it was January of last year, so January of 2023. And I ended up starting to have conversations with my husband. I had a conversation with my boss, kind of talking about like, what are the projects going to look like? He was also thinking about downsizing a little bit. I could tell like projects were slowing down. And so we kind of started talking. So I started having these conversations. And I also had a conversation with another local architect who is now my mentor. I
Oh,
actually had coffee with him yesterday, and we kind of talked about it, and it was kind of like, how did you do it? How did you go about it? So I started having these conversations, and that really grew like my confidence of where I was like, okay. And so I took the leap of faith and I said, okay, I'm going to incorporate. And then I'm going to open up a business bank account, get business cards, get a website going. And so February, March of last year, I started to kind of do the boring behind the scenes, the things you have to do. Everyone always thinks you have to get a client first, but that's not really, you have to have some sort of structure behind it, because when you
yeah.
get paid, where's that money going to go? Is it going to go in your personal bank account? It's like all these little things. So it just started to kind of evolve. So there wasn't really like a moment. It was always the plan, essentially, always the plan for me. Just when was it going to happen? How was it going to happen? Was always the question. And
Yeah.
then May of last year, I ended up getting let go with like 2 weeks' notice. And that
Wow.
was a little bit of a surprise, obviously. To some extent, it was a surprise. To some extent, it wasn't, because I saw my projects were starting to kind of dwindle at work. I had obviously had the conversation with my boss about going possibly part-time. My hope was to go in the fall, ended up kind of pushing that timeline to the spring. And I was already meeting with potential clients and starting to struggle juggling working 9 to 5. And then, it's a lot of people think, oh, I can definitely do the drawings in the morning or after work. But nobody thinks about the calls with clients and meeting with contractors and, going to the city for stuff. And that started to kind of also blend in with my 9 to 5. And so in the end, it was a blessing in disguise. I
Yeah.
kind of got pushed into it a little sooner than I think I would have been ready to.
Yeah.
But in the end, it was meant to happen the way it happened.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It seems
Yeah.
like the universe conspired, had been
Yes.
preparing you through thoughts and ideas and business cards and finding a
Mm-hmm.
time to take the perfect leap. But we're never going to find the perfect moment. I mean, is there
No,
ever such a thing? And
no.
it just sometimes just gives you a little nudge
Yep.
that sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes hurts. Or you just
Mm-hmm.
feel like, wait a second, skydiving and the parachute's not opening, but it does
Yep.
open. And
It
then look at
does.
you. You've
Yeah.
just celebrated your anniversary of your
Mm-hmm.
architecture firm. You're absolutely crushing it. And
Thank you.
congratulations, by the way. It's so, so, so,
Thank
so, so
you.
inspiring because for me, you're one of the few people I know who have an actual corporation. Many people, as
Mm-hmm.
coaches and consultants and speakers, yes, you have clients and you do all these wonderful things. But this is I don't want to say a whole different ballgame to like diminish anybody else. No, 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 no.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a serious thing that you're doing, that you've done.
Yeah.
And I see that, I recognize it. It's very inspiring on my end. So
Mm-hmm.
whenever I first heard about a little bit about your story here and there. I wanted to listen to every podcast to get the full information. And I was like, no, no, no. I need to have her on and I actually get like how this happened because it's so special.
It
Um,
is.
yeah. How has you speak about something that I find fascinating and I had never heard about before.
Hmm.
Vastu Shastra. And I'm saying that correctly?
Yes. Yes, you're saying
Okay.
it correctly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
What is the difference? Can you please explain what this is for people who have never heard
Hmm.
about it before? I've heard about it for the first time through your podcast.
Hmm.
And all I know is that I wanted to listen to all the episodes have so much value, but I
Hmm.
kept thinking about which ones talk about this the most because I really wanted to keep learning from you. So
Yeah.
can you tell us how this plays a role in your architecture designs and just what you teach and how
Hmm.
you operate in this field?
Absolutely. So Vastu Shastra is, if everybody mostly knows feng shui. So feng shui originated in China, Vastu Shastra originated in India, and it's one of the Vedic sciences. So if you're familiar with Ayurveda or like the Vedic astrology, Vastu Shastra is essentially the science of structures. So before there was a quote unquote like architecture degree or architecture, people in India would design homes according to Vastu Shastra. So it has to do with the cardinal directions, the different zones, and where you place, the bathroom or the kitchen or the bedroom where you sleep depends on, multiple things, but mostly the cardinal directions. And then certain zones have also are related to the elements, so like fire element, air element, water element, things like that.
Okay.
And I discovered Vastu Shastra, I think it was sometime in 2018. I was at this seminar and Sahara Rose, she's a Ayurvedic like practitioner. She's on Instagram. She's amazing. She had this like kind of like she talks a lot about her dharma, which is like your soul's purpose in life. And so I went to one of her talks and she was talking about like finding your dharma. And this was actually I went to her talk after I had failed one of my exams. And I was kind of like, architecture, is it for me? Which throughout the whole exam process, which that's another topic, I really questioned if architecture was for me. And so during one of these kind of moments where I failed, the architecture exam, I went to her talk and she's like, combining things that you love. So we had an exercise where we had to write down like the two things that we really love. And I'm like, oh, I love architecture and I love yoga. And I actually got my yoga teacher training certificate shortly after, or the year before. So I was like, that's right. It was the year before in 2017. So I was just immersed in yoga and architecture. And I looked at my page and I'm like, what am I going to do with these two things? Am I going to be like designing yoga shalas? Like, that's not really what I want to do. And just through kind of being in like the spiritual woo woo like corner of Instagram and social media, I found Vastu Shastra. And Vastu Shastra, it's like yoga for your home. You're balancing the energy of your home. And I was
Oh,
like, this is it. This is what I've been looking for. Like I can incorporate like my, like the energetic like organization of the house, and then I can also tie it into, my architecture field and the degree that I have spent so long pursuing. And so through Vastu Shastra, I've taken courses. I'm a consultant now. So, like, one of the projects I have going on right now is actually a house in Canada where I'm incorporating Vastu Shastra principles into the design of the home. Now, of course, I'm not licensed in Canada, so I'm just doing the concept design, and a local architect will take over during construction. But it's placing the rooms in certain locations for like abundance and to bring in health and prosperity into the home. So Vastu's kind of been a fun way for me to combine like architecture and yoga and the spiritual world for me. So that's been really, really fun.
that's so rewarding. Okay, when you speak about architecture and you speak about it in a very different way that I'm used to hearing about it, because my partner is an architect. And so I've
Really?
told him about you. Yeah, he's an architect.
I
And
did not
so
know that.
yeah, and he works on also like huge projects. And
So,
I told him, I said, listen, I have a friend. She's an architect, but she talks about Vastu Shastra. So I would like for you guys to talk because whenever you design a house for us, this needs to be incorporated.
that's so
I'm not
funny.
kidding. Like it's
Yeah,
actually a
yeah,
reality in our home.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I find it so valuable. And congratulations on those projects, by the way.
Thank
It's so
you.
big.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun, and I know I've been asked like do I always, whenever I'm designing, even in like my non-Vastu clients, like am I thinking about Vastu? And sometimes I am, and I also gauge with the client too, like if that would be something I mentioned to them. But sometimes I do. I definitely look at some of the spaces because in the end, like even with Vastu, just the intention of how the spaces move from one space to another, how they're adjacent, just even makes sense on just like it does make me a better architect as well. So there is that incorporation as well.
I love it. It gives it a completely the USP, right? It's a
Mm-hmm.
completely different angle to look at it. And I think that if I were to know that that exists and I'm building a home or any space for that matter, I want it to be part of where I am on a daily
Mm-hmm.
basis. I think it's a very powerful way. I believe that energy plays a huge role in how we feel and how we think and how we operate and what comes in and out of our lives. And
Mm-hmm.
that's just you're doing beautiful work,
Mm,
honestly. But
thank you.
okay, let's take it back a bit because you
Okay.
did mention that there was a time there where you maybe considered not being an architect, but you
Mm-hmm.
also, I know that mindset plays a really big role. And you mentioned yoga as well.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen any connection between your mindset and yoga practice more than anything, because that's what you are an expert
Mm-hmm.
in your love for architecture or how you execute it? Because of course it brought you to Vastu, but how does it play a role in your day to day?
So, yoga plays a day to day in my life where, especially during the exams, that's like my safe space. Like, if I'm feeling super frustrated or like I'm nervous or stressed out, I find myself on my mat and that's like my therapy. Like, that's yoga for me is like my therapy. It's just moving my body. And like now there's a yoga studio locally that I go to, but I also like just find videos on YouTube. I also sometimes just free flow whatever I'm feeling, like if I just feel a knot in my body. And for me, it's just like it's that medicine to just like keep me flowing and going. And so for me, it's just like I also meditate in the morning. So that's just part of like one of my daily rituals.
I love it. I find it a very peaceful practice that
Mm-hmm.
I am not an expert in at all, at all. Like I'm the beginner. I'm the person who's like looking at the instructor while they're calling out, like I'm that person. But every single time I do it, it's so the energy that I feel
Mm-hmm.
is it just transforms everything. I,
Mm-hmm.
I just it's such a different thing that I haven't received, for instance, through running.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always like exploring how different practices and different forms of exercise and movement and energy can play a role in our life. And I get curious about how those play a role in a person's life, for example, in what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing. How, on the mindset standpoint and the challenges and, all of this that you have seen in your journey from the very beginning of, becoming an architect or just in life, how has mindset played a role? Like, what are those challenges that you have had to overcome? Acquiring the degrees, the certifications, the architecture firm, and just your day to day life. Like, what have been those obstacles that made you maybe sometimes want to stop? How did you address them? Like, how would you talk to somebody else about this?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And it happens to a lot of people in architecture is I think the exams, the process of the exams. Like I said, it's a grueling process. And my first 5 exams, I failed. It took until I think I took my 7th exam that I finally passed one. And that can be very like I know I the one thing that I happened was when I started taking the exams they came out with a new version, so there wasn't enough study material, people weren't sure what was going on, so I think there was a little bit of timing because now even by the time I did start taking them finally, there's more content out there, more material. Now there's so many study groups and everything, you have that support. But so it was a lot for me once I passed. It was like, oh my gosh. And my husband is a huge part of his support. He took on so much of the household. We were only dating when I first started the exams. His support was a huge part of why I think I ended up passing. But the mindset through all of those exams and even the last exam, I think I passed that one on my 6th try, and that was my last one. And when you keep like hitting that failure and failure and failure, and there was a moment actually when I was about halfway through the exam process. I think I had already passed 3, and it was right around COVID. And I just had another fail. And I was like, maybe this is the universe's sign that I should not be an architect. Like, this is way too hard. Like, I mean, I've only passed 3. I failed probably like 12 at this point by the time you accumulate it all. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe this is some sort of sign. So my husband and I ended up going to Malibu for the weekend. And because we live in South Orange County. So we went up to Malibu and we stayed there for the weekend. And I told him, I said, I need this weekend to figure out if I should even still be an architect. And like, I was like, I just need to like sit in this feeling. And when I mean, at that point I was what, 28? And I've wanted to be an architect since I was 10. I mean, that's 18 years of a dream into one week. So there's a lot of pressure on that weekend. And so we took walks on the beach because that was still like kind of, I mean, there was really nothing you could do. So we took like nature walks and walks on the beach. And I really just like kind of processed that feeling of like, is this what I want? And like, because you have to have a strong mindset going into these exams and into, knowing that potentially, even if I decide to be an architect this weekend, I might fail at that next exam. Also, the exams cost $235 each exam, each retake. So of course there's also like the financial aspect of it that, comes into play. And so there's just a lot that goes into it. So we took the weekend and, we were walking on the beach and I still remember the moment. And my husband's like, so what would you want to do if you're not an architect? And I said, I've been processing it. And the only thing I can think of is like, because we were finally on vacation after a long time, I said, I could be a professional vacationer. I said, if someone paid me to take vacations, that's the only other thing I could think of besides
Sounds
being
nice.
an architect. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I said, this is nice. I said, going away for a long weekend, this is nice. I said, there's nothing like I thought about every possible like creative, like, because the field of architecture is also so broad. Like you can go into marketing, you can go into web design, you can go into like animation. Like when you think about a lot of the animated films and like how they have, cities built and stuff, architects can do that. Like there's so much I could do with an architecture degree. But at the end of the day, I was like, nope, I still want to be an architect. I want to do residential homes, very specific. So I only do residential architecture, and I was just very specific on that. And that's it. And I just was like, you know what? I just don't see any other way. And I kind of took that weekend and was like, okay, on to the next. And then the first few failures, of course, suck. They're just, it is, it's not fun to fail. But once you kind of fail a few more times, at the end, like if I saw failure, it was kind of just like, okay, well, let's see what I can learn from this, like this failure, from this not passing this exam. And then literally within the next hour, I would have my next exam scheduled because I just thought, nope, I'm going to do it and I'm going to do it until there is no like limit to how many times I will take these exams until I pass because I know I want to be an architect. And I actually have a podcast episode about this. It's called like making failure your bitch and how to just like,
Love it.
I don't know if we can say that on the podcast, but it's, so then to answer your question about what would I say to someone who's like going through failure after failure, or like they're trying to, maybe they have a great idea and like you keep getting, say, you keep presenting that idea and you keep getting that no, or that, we don't want to work with you, or you're not finding that job. Don't think of, and it could be a sign from the universe, just if it is, take a moment to really sit down and reflect on, is this something that you truly want? Because it could be the universe kind of testing you, seeing like, okay, I've put another obstacle in front of you, how badly do you want it? But
Yep.
then there's what I think is that it's only making you stronger for something else in the future. Because now that I went through the exams, it was so hard. Entrepreneurship seems so much easier than the exams. Like when now I have a roadblock in business, and like failure isn't even something I would think about with my company. Like it's not even a word I would think about in my vocabulary on if someone said, "Well, do you think your business is going to succeed or is it going to fail?" I'd be like, "Of course it's going to succeed." Like I've failed so many times on the exams, that's where the failure was. The success is going to be with my firm and with business, and I've gotten so much stronger through all of those failures that now it's like, even if I would fail, so what? You just dust yourself off and keep going. Like I don't see failure as anything big and scary like it used to be when I started the exams.
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. Because
Thank
I
you.
think that a lot of times when people fail, it's okay, let me go to plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I just talked about this in my last episode. I'm like, plan B. get rid of plan B. Like, why does there
Mhm.
have to be a plan B? Why does
Yep.
failure have to determine whether you do or don't?
Mhm.
It's just, and I completely, that concept of, is the universe giving you another obstacle to see how badly you want it, or is it telling you to stop? I
Mhm.
have felt that more than once. And it's just one of those moments where you kind of, I don't know if you went through it this way, but you just kind of have this moment. It lasts about an hour
Mhm.
of like, "Whew, okay, like, what is the universe trying to tell me? Like, is this really okay?" Da, da, da. And you kind of, no, 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 no. Like, I know it's just another test.
Mhm.
And for me, I have felt liberated in the past. I'm wondering, how did you feel after that weekend when you had your answer? Like, what was the inner feeling, the thoughts? What was that like in the, okay, moving forward?
I'd say it was a lot of just like, here we go, like kind of just like almost like you're ready, not for like a battle, but just this like almost adrenaline, like you're kind of like, I'm like not like boxing, like I'm ready to go, like it's me against
Rocky?
the exams. Yeah, like kind of like you just like, okay, like I said, like you dust it off and you're like, okay, just had a moment. And it's just like, it's almost like this more confidence. And going through the exams too, I didn't share too much of it with like I would let my family know sometimes. After a few times, you don't start telling people that you're going to take the exam, because you're like, if they're like, oh, so how did it go, and you failed again, you're trying to explain to them how hard it is. So it's like you kind of keep it internal. But
Yeah.
no, so after that weekend, I would say it was just kind of this like, okay, let me just dust myself off and like get back in the ring. When was that? So 2021 and fall of 2022. No, that was fall of 2020. So 2 years later, and I was licensed. So it's a lot of perseverance. And that's that question you were asking about mindset is, eventually I get this mindset of like, I'm just going to persevere, and like it's only going to make me stronger. And that's also what came out of that weekend. And I just pushed through, and I can't remember if I ended up passing that next exam after that weekend. I don't, it all kind of is a blur now. I'd have to look back, but I know it's just, yeah, you just got to persevere.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you're one step away from that success moment in
Hmm.
your life. But the trajectory of those quote unquote failures, whatever a failure is, I like to see them as lessons.
Yes.
They kind of sometimes mask the fact that you're about to be there.
Hmm.
And when you talk about, almost not sharing with people very much what was going on behind the scenes, I think that it's powerful because for me, I share what I know I'm okay with you asking about, despite the
Hmm.
outcome. There, when it comes to mindset and just energy, from beliefs to thoughts to words, there's a very big shift, and words are so powerful.
Hmm.
And for me, like, once people start having, in the nicest way, an opinion or, something to say or a thought, I don't like to, I don't like for my dreams and my goals to be penetrated by that until I'm
Hmm.
ready for that to happen.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it's always nice to kind of go through the process by yourself and ask for support, or, a little bit of a, like, a cheerful moment when you need
Hmm.
it. But it also is very brave to be doing it by yourself. I know you had your partner, but at the same time, sometimes we just want to have that reassurance from family members,
Hmm.
and it's harder to not. And so it's very brave that you did that. Now,
Thank you.
I know that you have some really wonderful projects going on at the moment.
Hmm.
What are these looking like? Because from my understanding, you have your firm, you've had your anniversary, you're absolutely
Hmm.
crushing it, like I said, but now you're moving also to another phase of your business. Am I right? Are we
uh
supporting
Another,
our
the
people who want to start their own
oh
firm or
yes, my ebook.
businesses? I'm
Yes,
like, oh my
thank you.
gosh, am I like, did I not read this right?
No, you did. I was like, oh my gosh, well, can I plug my book? Yes. Of course, yes, I am. So I am, now that I have gone through starting my own architecture business, and so many people helped me along the way. I mean, first off, Google, thank you so much, Google. The like the my mentor, like I mentioned, there's a few people on Instagram, a few other architects, entrepreneurs that I reached out to with questions and was like, "How did you do this? Hey, do you mind if I ask you this?" And I'm so grateful for the community that helped me, that now I want to give back. And so I ended up writing an ebook, The Mindful Blueprint to Launching Your Architecture Firm, which came out in March. That ebook is to help anyone, because and now I get questions like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? And so I've created this ebook to help you start your architecture business, but also mindfully. Because so there's a meditation that's incorporated, and I'm big on like gratitude and gratitude lists, because it's so easy in entrepreneurship and like business to burn out. And of course, like that's like the big, buzzword too, is burnout. But so I want you to approach starting your business mindfully, because it's a huge decision. It's a scary decision. So I kind of take it step by step. If you're thinking about starting your architecture firm tomorrow or in 3 years, what are the steps that you can do and how to do them? And so thank you for letting me share my ebook, because now
Of
I've
course.
come into this space of, I've gone through it and so many people helped me that I want to help them. And I'd
Yeah.
like to turn it into a video course that's like on my manifestation board. It's the time, it's got to finding the time for it.
Right.
But I'm definitely, going into this role of, let me help you now, because it's such a fulfilling moment for me, like to have my own architecture firm, that I want other people to feel the way that I feel.
I love it. Congratulations for that because,
Thank you.
well, I have so many thoughts about it in the most positive way. Number one, if anybody is seeking to start this journey, you want to learn from somebody who's been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt and the trophy.
Hmm.
And many times, you basically are able to cut on all that time and the confusion. Am I doing this right? Is it how it's supposed to be?
Hmm.
By going straight to the source that has done it, who has done it.
Hmm.
And also in the world of starting businesses and everything being so fast paced, especially in sales and coaching and consulting and everything, it's so fast and people have so much to say. And I don't see a lot of people who are taking a step back and saying, let's do this in a mindful way. Let's do
Hmm.
what feels good for us. Let's do like think long term and let's just take this step by step. Annette would be one of them,
Hmm.
and now and you're another, but I don't see it often. And I do believe that it is needed because I don't know about you, but from my experience in starting a business and following certain voices who perhaps, whether it worked or didn't, that's a whole different story, but it was so rushed all the time.
Yeah.
And the
Hmm.
only thing that it led to beyond like, yeah, clarity and whatever, burnout,
Hmm.
absolute burnout. And some moments of frustration. It's like, am I doing the right thing? And
Hmm.
always questioning yourself and comparing yourself. And I believe that when you want to do something that is so good for your career and for your business and for your life, having that intentional mindset behind it
Hmm.
is very powerful in the journey. And so thank you for creating that. And I will share it as often as I can. And it will be in the
Thank you.
description down below for people to access and gain support from you as well. So
Thank
I
you.
have a couple more questions.
Hmm.
Number one, well, yeah, last two, but one of them is, what are you grateful for lately? What is something that
Oh,
your heart just feels very thankful for?
I would say this past week, because this past week it's been a very slow week business wise for me, but it has come at the right time, because
Yeah.
last month, so the month of May was a huge personal month. I had a lot of travels back to the Czech Republic, sick family member, had a grandparent pass away, and there was just a lot that happened over the last, really since like the last week of April, beginning of May. It has just been like go, 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 go. Like there has been no like stopping, taking a break to just like breathe. And I knew, because my husband and I went camping last weekend, which is also something I'm grateful for. I knew I had to get to that date of like, once we go camping, I have nothing planned after that. And I am just so grateful for this last week, because at first I was a little worried. I'm like, well, my billable hours aren't usually as high as they have been. But I'm like, you needed this week. You needed this week I've worked an hour here, hour there, and then I've gone to the pool to read my book. And like my whole nervous system, I can just feel it completely, just like this huge sigh of relief throughout my whole body. And so I'm just so grateful for that this week.
I love this for you. I'm sending you a big
Thank
hug.
you. Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
this because I know
Thank
you've
you.
been through a lot. And listening to your last episode, I was like, wait a second, can we do this? Should we do this? You know what I mean? And you're like, wait, hold on. But yeah, just taking a break. And I think again, that's something that, as being your own boss and having your own business, you don't realize how much you don't stop working.
Yeah.
And it's creating those structures, and I'm going to stop at this time and all of this. You have very valuable content about this on your podcast. So if you're listening, go check it out. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And last question, if somebody is listening and they're ready to do something gutsy in their life, they're standing at the edge of a cliff, they know what's on the other side, they're not so sure that their parachute works, but they have an inkling that there's something really good is going to happen from this leap, what would you tell them to encourage them to do that brave thing in their life and go for it and believe that it is possible for them?
I would say just go for it. Like, just do it. Just do it, because I mean, yeah, Nike, just do it. Like, what's the worst? If you think about like what's the worst that could happen when I jumped into entrepreneurship, what's the worst thing that could happen? Okay, I could fail and I'd have to go work for someone else. Oh my gosh, that's it. At least I gave it a shot and at least I tried. And I think that's the biggest thing, because there's, like we started the episode with, there's no perfect time to start something. And so if you keep kind of hesitating and waiting, that moment might pass. So there's never a right moment. There's never a right time. So just go for it. You may be surprised. Like, you'll surprise yourself. And I think also trust yourself that you have what it takes, and like trust yourself. If you're thinking like, oh, maybe I don't know if I can do it, just have this like trust in yourself that you're going to be able to do it, and have that confidence, and just go for it and kind of see what happens. Like, I don't want to say fly by the seat of your pants, but sometimes you need to do that. You need to do that. Do it mindfully. Don't burn out. But sometimes you gotta just do it. Just do, like, what are you waiting for? And that would be a question, is to ask yourself, like, what are you waiting for? What's the worst thing that could happen? And I mean, I don't think there's anything terrible that could happen, so why not just go for it?
I received that.
Yeah. Good. Good.
Thank you. And I'm sure the person listening does as well. Okay, just kidding. Last question.
Okay.
How can people get in touch with you?
Okay, perfect. Great question. So I'm most active on my social media. So on Instagram at From the Honeycomb Podcast, I do stories. I talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. I throw in random stuff. So that's where I'm most active. You can also listen to my podcast, From the Honeycomb Podcast. And those are really like the two places that I am the most active, where you can reach me.
Beautiful. So if you're listening, go check it out. Just so you know, your Instagram, your socials, if you ever post something, this is why I'm saying this, because it's so good. If you ever post something and I don't watch it, or if you see that I stopped watching it, it's because I need to watch it. I love everything you post. And
Thank you.
And I do this with a few people when I really want to know what's being said or what's on the other side, the message. It's always so valuable, whether it's about entrepreneurship, architecture, Vastu, yoga, and it means a lot. And so you're one of those platforms, and I want to say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Because you add a lot of value into my life and into my feed, and I know that you will in the lives of others. So go check it out. And thank you so, so much for being here. I am extremely grateful that you've taken the time and shared a little bit about your story. I know it's maybe just the tip of the iceberg of all that's happened in your life, but at least for me, it's been very rewarding to learn about it and very inspiring. And I truly, truly thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Claudia, for having me and for giving me the space to share my story. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you. And for those of you guys listening, once again, go check out Katerina's Instagram, her podcast, From the Honeycomb Podcast. And I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to be the optimal leader of your life. I believe in you.